Hello, welcome to this session of Talking Tech, Women and Girls in ICT. My name is Seynabou, and today I'm delighted to be representing Women in AI, and I'm excited to have a discussion about tech and tech careers with Dr. Louise Pryor, who is the chair of the London Climate Change Partnership and a non-executive director of the Ecology Building Society. So the Talking Tech series is a series celebrating girls and women in tech being recorded around the world between Girls in ICT Day and Girls in ICT Day 2022. Girls in ICT Day is an international day marked on the fourth Thursday of each April. And in 2020, Girls in ICT Day was on the 23rd of April. So the objective of Girls in ICT Day is to help and create a global environment that empowers and encourages girls and young women to consider studies and careers in growing fields of information communication technologies. The Talking Tech series is brought to you by the ITU, the UN ICC, and the Office of the UN Secretary General Envoy on Youth, and is in support of Equals, which is the global partnership for gender equality in the digital age. Women AI is pleased to be a partner on this session today. So the goal of this series includes to raise the interest and inspire girls and young women with information about a range of ICT careers that can be had. They also want to bring forward a broad audience, some of the role models of women in tech, and share information about their career journeys and work. They also want to offer diverse example of how ICT is being used to support the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals and other UN goals. They also want to showcase initiatives that are working with girls to support them in ICT studies and future ICT careers, as well as provide girls and young women in tech with a leadership opportunity to represent and promote a girl in tech organizations with which they can be involved and promoted to a broader international audience. To kick off this session, I'm just going to introduce you to Women in AI, which is a non-for-profit centered around making the field of AI more inclusive and promote the development of AI that is actually working towards a social goal and a social mission, and just overall make the field more accessible and inclusive to marginalized populations. If you want more information about Women in AI, feel free to join womeninai.co or follow us on LinkedIn. I'm part of the Canada team, so if you want, you can also follow the Canadian chapter on LinkedIn. So just Women in AI Canada. I'm really happy to be presenting you today Dr. Louise Pryor, who is a really brilliant woman who got involved in a variety of different projects, including sustainability and more inclusive fields in actuary. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Seynabou.
The pleasure is all mine. So I guess I can start with some of the questions, but do you want to first introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. So I'm Louise Pryor. I have been programming since I was an early teenager, which is a few years ago now. And I've had a very varied career, including a lot of programming. I'm an actuary. I'm currently president-elect of Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, which is the UK's professional body, and I become president in June, which is very exciting. And I also have several roles sort of in the sustainability field.
Okay, that's amazing. So when did you get into technology and how did you get there?
I was introduced to programming, I can't remember exactly well when, in my early teens, so that would have been in the 1970s. It was a sort of holiday activity club thing that I belonged to that suggested doing programming. And I mean, in those days, it was quite difficult. So we wrote programs, as I recall, by writing them out on bits of paper and then sending them off to a computer somewhere where a key punch operator punched them onto cards that were then fed into the computer. So as you can imagine, it was actually quite hard to get a working program out of all that, because such a long feedback loop and so many delays. And then kind of I've been programming ever since, really, off and on. When I read maths at university and then became an actuary. Actuaries are sort of applied mathematicians in many ways. We do sort of statistics and probability in business contexts, especially in insurance and pensions and things like that. So even in the early 80s when I started, we relied on computers a lot, and I was heavily involved in writing some of the models that we were using at that time. By this stage we did have VDUs, we did have screens to use, but not PCs yet. That came in a bit later. And then just since then, I've done a lot of programming. I decided after qualifying as an actuary that I wanted to get more into that sort of thing. So I went off and did a PhD in computer science, in artificial intelligence, actually, which is why I'm so thrilled to hear about your organization. And then for some years, I lectured in computer science at universities. Then I worked for a couple of startups, and then eventually sort of moved gradually back into the actuarial area, first through talking to actuaries about how they were using software, how they could use software engineering techniques how they develop all their Excel models and so on. And for the last few years, I'm mainly actuarial, but I still do a bit of coding, supporting various financial models and things. And I maintain a couple of small websites and all that sort of thing, just because that's kind of what I do.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's a really rich background. And you went from basically doing actuary, so math, and then kind of jumping into tech because you just enjoyed programming. That's really interesting. And it must have been, you've been part of the pioneers, I guess, for programming.
Well, I mean, I was programming very early. I mean, you know, I'm talking punched cards, paper tape, that sort of thing. So I guess there weren't very many of us then. There always, of course, have been women involved. And I wasn't really very plugged into that computing community in those days. But yeah, I mean, I've been programming for pretty much as long as nearly everybody I know, longer than most.
Okay, I see. And during your path, is there anything you like doing better, like being in startups or maybe more like freelance work?
I've enjoyed pretty much everything I've done for a period. It turns out that what I really enjoy is doing new things, learning new skills, learning about new worlds. So every time you start something new, even to a certain extent, when you start with a new employer, one thing you're doing is finding out how a new little world operates, because everything has different ways of doing it. And I've always enjoyed that. So to me, it's really the learning that's the thing I enjoy most, I think.
Yeah, no, I really see what you mean. I actually just started a new job yesterday with an organization called SAMA, and
Well,
they're doing a lot of
congratulations.
really amazing work. Thank you so much. I really like the social mission of that company. They're currently focusing on giving respectable jobs with a decent pay to people in developing countries. So it's a really lovely mission, and I'm so happy to be part of the team. And they're providing a really great service, and I look forward to seeing how I can continue with them. I guess you mentioned that you did some work in regards to sustainability. How does that tie in with programming and actuaries?
I didn't see it as necessarily tying in at first. I got involved in sustainability because I think climate change is the biggest problem that we face today. And I just thought it was really important and I needed to do something about it. However, as an actuary, it's really important because what actuaries do is they think about risk. And especially they think about long-term financial risk. Actuaries, some of them work on shorter periods, but actuaries work over periods of, 20, 30, up to 40, 50, 60 years. People making pension contributions now are going to live for another 60, 70 years. So it's all about, is their pension future going to be secure? And of course, climate change and indeed other sustainability risks have huge financial implications.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we think about that. And so that's one of the things I've been involved with, is helping actuaries to see how it ties into their work, thinking about ways that they can think about climate risk in that context.
Yeah, no. So it's kind of nice to see a raise in awareness on the importance of sustainability, especially in the field of finance. I see a lot of new fintech startups that are popping up just to try to help financial institutions take more responsible choices. So that's really a lovely change to see.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. And we do tend to think that technology provides solutions. We tend to think in terms of solutions and how fintech can really help sustainability, and that's absolutely true. But we also need to think about our own impact. So one of the things, I mean, certainly in the AI world, is, which of course has changed enormously over the last 30 years, as we've got massively increased data, massively increased computing power, is we need to think about our carbon emissions too. So some of the machine learning work that's done involves incredibly intense computation, and that doesn't come for free. That emits a lot of carbon. So we do need to think about how we use these extremely powerful techniques in a responsible way.
No, that's very fair. That's something people don't necessarily always think about. And even in other situations, like with electric vehicles, when they don't think about how much energy you need to make those batteries. But at least people are aware and trying not to make the same mistakes as before. Kind of like with plastic. Because back in the days, plastic was the whole new thing because it didn't require cutting down trees.
Yeah.
But in the end, it had a more negative impact than we anticipated. So I'm really happy to see that people at least are providing new solutions, and at least they are aware of some of the dangers and trying to actually mitigate those future issues.
No, I think that's right. You know, nothing's easy. The world is incredibly complex. I mean, it's this huge, complex system. I don't know if you've come across the field of systems thinking much, but that talks about how to think about these really complex systems. And the point is, there's no easy fixes. And you always have to look at sort of all the potential linkages and see what the unintended effects might be.
Yeah, is it more related to making simulations and making growth estimations, or what?
Yeah, so well, in my work as an actuary, what we tend to do is we do financial models basically for pensions and social security, sort of projecting forward how people are going to pay money in, take money out, how they're going to die, become ill, become unemployed, all that sort of thing. And on insurance, it's pretty much the same. You project what the income from premiums might be and what the outgoings from paying insurance claims might be, depending on all sorts of complicated things. And with insurance, what you're obviously trying to do is to think about whether there's going to be enough money in the bank. You know, is the insurer going to stay solvent? So there's a lot of very, very complex statistical modeling that goes into that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm guessing there's a raise in use of AI in those statistical models as well.
Yes, in different sorts of fields. So in insurance, we see, for example, in motor insurance, in many countries, we're seeing the increased use of telemetry, which is where you have a little box in your car that picks up driving patterns, if you like. And so there's a lot of data analytics goes into interpreting that data and thinking how that can be related to risk. And in general, with the growth of big data, we're seeing that it can be analyzed in all sorts of ways that have a bearing on risk, which is sort of what actuaries are about.
Basically, whenever I hear about insurances and AI, I kind of just get a little bit worried because I mean, whenever we talk about biases in AI, and when the insurance world hasn't always been fair in certain situations where some people, depending on which cultural background they might have, might be paying more money on insurance or getting less fair things. So
yeah, I mean, this is the whole, you know, I mean, it's a major statistical problem, isn't it? That correlation is not causation. And it just rears its head absolutely everywhere. And it's something we have to be really aware of. But also, I think there is a slight potential problem anyway with insurance, that the idea of insurance is essentially based on pooling risk, that you know, you as a individual person or possibly individual corporation or whatever, you put your risk into the pool, essentially, that the insurer is, and then the insurer spreads that risk over all sorts of different participants. And one of the issues is that with increased data, it's becoming easier to divide people into smaller and smaller groups, which means that there's less pooling of risk and more sort of allocation of risk, if you like, to much smaller groups. And that, in a way, is getting away from the basics of how insurance has always worked. And there's a huge danger that if it goes too far, you're not really going to get the risk protection that insurance provides, because the too much of the risk is going to be borne by the individual person, whereas in some sense the point of insurance is to provide this safety net so that the risk doesn't have to be all borne by the individual person, and that sort of everyone chips in a bit. So there's some really interesting things which I think are quite connected with a lot of the ethical concerns that there are around data science and AI, about bias, because, you know, we can't analyze things that aren't in the data. So, for example, an awful lot of data is collected about men, but not about women, and then the conclusions that are drawn are stated as applying to everybody. And this turns out to be a huge problem in various health-related fields, but also things like safety equipment, which is designed for men, and women typically are smaller, and, you know, the equipment doesn't fit them. So that there are huge problems in data bias. My feeling is that as people involved in the technology, we mustn't lose track of the bigger picture, and we must think about the ethics of what we're doing. I think it's really important.
No, that's definitely true. I know there are some incentives being created in order to make sure that the people do some sort of impact analysis before they propose a solution. So that's more on whether you want to get some public funds. And have you heard of any other incentive that seems to be good at mitigating or preventing those kinds of issues?
I'm not really, this isn't, you know, my specialist area, so I'm not really aware of specific things. Here in the UK, the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, which I'm involved with, has joined with the Royal Statistical Society to produce a code of ethics for data science, for example. So there are bodies thinking about this, but in the end, it's, well, I mean, it's the individual people, isn't it? I mean, you look at the Volkswagen emissions scandal, for example. That was folk in technology biasing the data deliberately in order to produce a result that they wanted to see.
So I'm guessing going with a system of sanctions is more of the way to go, given that the industry is the one producing the most carbon emissions. Like, do they also have some sort of policies surrounding, I guess, what you would call greenwashing, when you're trying to seem sustainable, but you're not actually working towards sustainability.
Yeah, you know, people always want to put the best spin on what they're doing, and we get it in all these areas where sort of ethics or indeed anything comes. So we get it in the sustainability area, we get it in the discrimination area. It's always difficult.
Yeah, I guess it's not always easy, but hopefully we'll see a positive change soon, since organizations like yours are trying to raise awareness about the importance, and I feel like younger generations are being thought about these issues much earlier than well, my generation, for example. I didn't get to look much into it when I was at school, but I see what my well my younger brother, for example, it's just a 6 years difference, but I'm impressed to see how much quality education he's getting when it comes to those current issues. So yeah. I guess what I'm really curious to hear about now is maybe more about some of the challenges you faced while during in your careers, and how you overcame them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always been quite lucky. I haven't faced huge challenges, except that looking back, a lot of the time there's been a sort of low-level challenge type thing. At my school, which was a girls' school, there were very few of us doing maths and science compared to the number of people doing English and history, and it was, you know, slightly unusual to be doing maths and physics, which is what I specialized in at school. And then when I was at university, I think in my year 10% of the maths students were women, so, you know, not that many. And then the careers advice I got was, the careers advisor said, oh, well, you know, essentially he said, oh, well, you're a woman and you're doing maths, you're going to be a teacher then. And I kind of said no, because it was obvious to anyone who knew me that was not the correct answer. I had, when I first looked at going into being an actuary, the way you do it, it's a bit like accountancy. You work in, you know, for an actuarial company or an insurer or whatever while you take the exams. And one man at one of the big firms said, well, we've never had a woman qualify with us, implication that, you know, women just couldn't do this. So, and then by the time I did qualify, not very long afterwards, I got through the exams pretty quickly. I think at that stage there were fewer than 100 qualified women actuaries in England at the time, compared to, say, at that stage probably 4,000 or 5,000 men. I've always worked in very male-dominated work environments, both as an actuary and obviously when I later on went into computer science and software. And I guess I've got used to that, but it still brings me up short sometimes when I just realize how male dominated my professional world sometimes is. That's not a huge challenge, but it is wearing to live with the whole time, you know?
Yeah, no, I feel you. I see I didn't talk about my studies, but I also studied math and stats at university. And I took a programming class because that was a mandatory course. And I just loved what I did there, which is why I switched to doing a joint major in math and stats and computer science.
Yeah.
So just like you, I was also in like a male-dominated field. I guess things have changed a little because there is a higher percentage of women in those fields now, but we were still a minority. And I saw the same things at work, except at my old job with Myelin, where we had more women than men, and the dev team was composed of women only.
Wow.
So except the CTO, who was a man, but that was actually quite a pleasant change for once.
Yeah.
And I think people are curious about how they managed to pull that off, but it's just that their social mission was something that really drew in like women, I believe. They were focusing on mental wellness and mental health and creating a platform for collaboration. So I think just having a good social mission is something that draws women in. I don't know if you've noticed that kind of incline that we sometimes have to go towards companies that have an impact.
I think that's right. I mean, you do see women being drawn towards, I don't like generalizing about women do this and men do that, because, you know, there's such a wide
Definitely.
range. It may be that it's considered socially more acceptable for women to do, and that's why it happens. I mean, I'm not at all sure it's anything innate. I suspect it's to do with social conditioning.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's what I meant. I'm very much aware that it's not about how we are built. It's just because of how society currently is raising women that we are following a specific path. But yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah. But you know, it's just because a lot of women do it doesn't mean it's a bad thing to do. I mean, on the contrary, really.
Yeah. No, it's we kind of need that. Do you have any advice you might want to share with young girls or women in technology?
I've got a lot of advice. I'm not easy to shut up sometimes. One thing advice that was given to me a few weeks ago, and that was as I enter into being president of the IFoA, which is, you know, a pretty big deal for me. It's a huge honor. This profession that I've been part of for many, many years, to be heading it up is a fantastic honor. And I am the 4th woman president we've had in the UK, which is good. I mean, it's better than being the first in many ways, because I've got 3 great predecessors, but 4 in well over 150 years isn't that many, to be honest. And somebody said to me, well, the really important thing, Louise, is that you're true to yourself, is that you be yourself and don't try and be what you think other people want you to be. And that is, I think, a good thing to do. And I think I've done it through my life by recognizing some things about myself. And I think this is where I really get to the advice. Learn what you enjoy doing, learn what matters to you, and try and actually articulate it. So to me, it became fairly clear that what I enjoy doing is new things, and that I'm not somebody who can stay in the same job for many, many years. I think all of us have to change. I mean, none of us is going to be the same at age 50 as we were at age 30 or age 60 as we were at age 20. And especially nowadays, the world is changing so much that if you're just starting out on your career, you simply cannot expect the work you do now to be the same as the work you're going to be doing in 20, 30 years' time, because everything's changing so much. So you have to be prepared to learn. And you can approach that in 2 ways. For some people, it really works to stay in the same line of business, if you like, possibly even in the same job, but making sure that that job and what you do changes underneath you or along with you as you go. Or you can do it like I've done, which is just to make fairly radical changes every so often because I get bored. And you have to work out which of those 2 sorts of people, or in the middle somewhere or whatever, and what works for you. But the important thing, the really important thing, is to keep learning the whole time, because if you don't keep learning, you'll be left behind.
Yeah, no, that's really beautiful. I love that advice. I think I'm gonna try to apply that a little bit more. I've been doing that, given that I did switch studies twice, because I started off in business and then switched to math and stats, and then went for the joint major. And I had a short entrepreneurial journey. Then I joined a startup focused on mental wellness, and now I'm with Sama, which is like still an AI startup. But yeah, that's I think that resonates a lot with me. So thank you so much for that.
And do you find that in these various things you've learnt new skills?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
With I guess during my entrepreneurial journey, it's more about some leadership skills and confidence skills, because before then I would not be able to speak in public, and I had to actually do pitches and sometimes talk to complete strangers and just pitch the idea of the company. I also learned a bunch of different skills when it comes to just well, marketing and social media, creating assets and all. And with Myelin, it's more improving as a developer and basically web development, all of that, which is very useful now since I'm joining Sama as a software engineer. So I'm really happy with everything that I've learned. And I think at the core, what I loved was just how I learned to use technology in order to work towards solutions that are beneficial to society in general. So I guess that's one major learning that I really.
And I think it's really important, actually, some of the points you brought out there, that the learning is not just about technical skills, it's about much broader things too.
You mentioned doing stuff that you loved. Is there anything that you like that might not necessarily be too well involving your career or technology? So maybe hobbies and whatnot.
Yeah, I like being outdoors. I like going, hiking and all that sort of thing. Not being able to do so much of that this past year for fairly obvious reasons.
Okay.
But I also been doing a lot of knitting and dressmaking and sort of things to do with fabrics and fibers and yarns and things. And I enjoy that because I actually like the sort of slightly routine mechanical aspects, getting into a rhythm. It's cool and relaxing and calming and takes me out of myself a bit. But I also like the engineering aspects. I think the really cool thing about knitting and crochet too, actually, though I haven't really done much crochet, is the fact that you are constructing a 3D object, a garment or whatever, from essentially a single strand of yarn. I mean, okay, you use several and so on, but essentially you've got this one 2D line that you're weaving in some sense into a 3D object, and it's not rigid either, so you've got all sorts of, so just the whole thing about how it's all put together and fits together just really I find fascinating.
I really love that comparison. I should have knitted just now during the interview because I have like the scarf I'm making. So yeah. But I love your comparison and how you're tying everything to basically mathematics and just engineering in general. And I guess at heart you are an engineer.
Probably. I mean, actually, well, back in my university days, I did mostly pure maths. I didn't even really do applied maths. But certainly over my career, I enjoyed building things. So that's very much how I see computer programming is building things. And I enjoy solving problems. And those two aspects sound very kind of engineering to me, actually, because the point is, can you get something to work rather than is it very pretty theoretically? No, the point to me is to get things to actually work.
I guess that wraps up our session. Is there any other thing you wanted to add before we end?
No, just thank you very much for the opportunity to do this, and I've really enjoyed talking to you, Seynabou, and the chat today. It's been really interesting, and I'm so thrilled to hear about your new job, and I hope it goes really, really well. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot from it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really happy I got to meet you, and I'm really inspired by your journey, and hopefully my career will be just as rich. Thank you to our viewers.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.